Hey, sweetheart, this parking's for real soldiers. The biker laughed as the woman stepped out of her van, her prosthetic leg clearly visible. People nearby snickered. She said nothing, but 30 minutes later, 8 Marines in full-dress uniform stood silently blocking every exit of the lot. Still believe in respect for those who served hit 1. If you do, the afternoon sun beat down on the crowded shopping center parking lot. Sergeant Natalie Rhodes, 48 years old, guided her gray van into an empty disabled veteran parking space, displaying her official tag prominently on the rearview mirror. After 11 years of service and the devastating IED explosion in Iraq that had taken her left leg in 2007. This small courtesy was one of the few acknowledgments of her sacrifice. She had been honorably discharged in 2009 after multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. She took a deep breath before opening her door. These public outings still caused anxiety, the stares, the questions, the occasional confrontation, but she needed groceries, and her physical therapist had encouraged her to maintain independence despite the phantom pain that still plagued her most days. As Natalie swung her legs out of the driver's seat, she felt the familiar eyes on her. A group of 5 men in leather vests, covered with military-style patches, loitered by their motorcycles just a few spaces away. Their laughter reached her ears before their words did. "Hey, sweetheart, this parking's for real soldiers," called out the tallest one. A heavy-set man with a graying beard and a faded camouflage bandana. Natalie froze. She'd heard comments like this before, but they never stopped stinging. She probably just married a soldier and took the tag. Another one said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "My cousin's in the army, and he says women never see real combat anyway." The small crowd of shoppers passing by slowed down. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few even smiled at the biker's comments, but no one said anything. Natalie reached for her cane from the passenger seat and carefully pulled herself up to standing. The prosthetic leg that replaced her left limb below the knee was clearly visible beneath her shorts. A modern carbon fiber design that had taken months to adjust to her gait was slightly uneven despite years of physical therapy. But she stood straight and proud, just as she had been trained to do in the Marines. The prosthetic had been upgraded 3 times since her injury, each version more advanced, but none quite able to replace what had been lost. She said nothing as she pulled on her gloves, specially designed to protect her hands when using the cane. The silence seemed to encourage the bikers. "Maybe she bought that fake leg online," joked another, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Amazon sells everything these days." More laughter, more stares, more silence from those who could have spoken up. Natalie straightened her back, just as she had done thousands of times during her military career. She closed her van door, adjusted her bag across her shoulder, and began walking toward the store entrance, her gait steady but unmistakably altered by the prosthetic. "I didn't survive that war just to explain myself in every parking lot," she muttered under her breath, too quietly for anyone else to hear. Each step away from the taunting felt like a retreat, but confrontation wouldn't help. She'd learned that painful lesson before walk away. Her therapist had advised not every battle needs fighting, but as she passed a young man in a gray military hoodie pulled low over his eyes, she couldn't help but notice how he watched the scene unfold before quickly turning away, phone in hand, inside the store. Natalie focused on her shopping list, bread, eggs, coffee, simple tasks to keep her mind from replaying the parking lot incident. But her hands trembled slightly as she reached for items on the shelves. The fluorescent lights made her headache worse. Another lasting gift from the IED blast that had left her with mild traumatic brain injury, alongside her more visible wounds. She paused in the cereal aisle, leaning more heavily on her cane as memories threatened to surface. Dust clouds, screaming the smell of burning fuel. "Are you all right, ma'am?" a store employee asked, noticing her momentary disorientation, "Just a headache." Natalie replied with the practiced smile she'd developed for civilian concerns. She finished her shopping methodically, the routine helping to ground her back in the present. The weight of the basket pulled at her shoulder, aggravating old injuries, but she refused the offers of assistance. Independence was hard won after months of being bedridden back outside. 20 minutes later, she discovered the situation had worsened. The bikers had moved closer to her van and were now lounging against a nearby car. One of them, a younger man with sleeve tattoos, held up his phone. Got a perfect shot of her for the group page, he announced to his friends, caption stolen valor alert at Westfield Mall, fake disabled vet taking. Spots from real heroes. Natalie's stomach tightened. She'd seen those online groups before where self-appointed military defenders publicly shame people they deemed unworthy. Her photograph would be online within minutes, subject to ridicule from thousands. Just get to the van, she told herself. Just like extraction under fire. Focus on the objective. As she approached her van, a mall security guard intercepted her. A thin man with an oversized uniform and a nervous expression. His name badge read Parsons, and he couldn't have been more than 25, ma'am. He said, not quite meeting her eyes, "We've had a complaint about unauthorized use of the disabled veteran parking." The bikers watched from a short distance, smirking. The tallest one gave a mock salute, triggering snickers from his companions. "I have proper authorization," Natalie replied quietly, reaching for her ID carrier where she kept her military identification alongside her driver's license. Anyone can buy those tags online. One of the bikers called out, "My buddy works at the VA. He says female vets are taking resources from guys who actually saw combat." The security guard looked uncomfortable but pressed on. "Could you provide some additional verification that you're actually a veteran? Perhaps military ID or discharge papers?" Natalie felt her cheeks burn as shoppers slowed to watch the confrontation. She produced her military ID card and showed it to the guard. He examined it with exaggerated scrutiny. "This says Marine Corps, but your license plate frame says Army." The frame was a gift from a friend. Natalie explained, her voice steady despite her increasing heart rate. "I served in the Marine Corps for 11 years. 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan." The guard looked unconvinced behind him. The bikers made exaggerated, doubtful expressions, encouraging his skepticism. "Maybe we should call the VA to verify," he suggested, handing back her ID. An older woman pushing a shopping cart stopped nearby for a moment. Natalie thought she might intervene, but after a quick glance at the intimidating bikers, she hurried past, eyes down. "It's fine," Natalie said softly. "I've been questioned before. I'm used to being invisible." The security guard shifted uncomfortably. "Well," the gentleman said. "The gentleman is wrong," Natalie interrupted, her voice barely audible. "But I understand you're just doing your job." As the confrontation continued, the young man in the gray military hoodie watched from the edge of the parking lot. He stepped behind a large SUV, pulled out his phone, and made a call, speaking urgently in hushed tones. Before quickly walking toward the exit, Natalie caught fragments of his conversation. "Staff Sergeant Rhodes." "No, sir, it's bad disrespecting a decorated Marine." Natalie finally reached her van, the security guard reluctantly allowing her to leave after examining her Purple Heart license plate as she settled into the driver's seat. She opened her glove compartment and removed a small velvet box. Inside lay her Bronze Star Medal awarded for valor during an operation that had cost her not just her leg, but 3 of her closest friends. She carefully wrapped it in tissue paper and placed it on the passenger seat. Some days, she needed the reminder of who she really was, not who others perceived her to be as she started her engine. She noticed the bikers had returned to their motorcycles, laughing and pointing at her van as she prepared to leave. The security guard had already moved on to other duties, the momentary drama forgotten. No one had stood up for her. Not the shoppers. Not the other veterans who surely must have been among them. Not even the security staff who should have protected her from harassment. It was a familiar loneliness, the same she'd felt in hospital rooms and physical therapy sessions and countless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if her sacrifice had meant anything at all. No one spoke up, no one helped her. If you've ever felt invisible like that, type alone in the comments. 30 minutes later, The bikers were still in the parking lot, having moved to a small outdoor seating area near the coffee shop entrance. They lounged in metal chairs, sharing cigarettes and scrolling through phones, occasionally showing each other their screens with bursts of laughter. The tall one with the bandana pointed excitedly at his phone post already has 50 comments. People are pissed about these fake vets taking spaces. Another biker, younger with a shaved head, leaned over to look. Man, you should see what they're saying about female Marines' brutal stuff. The parking lot had filled with afternoon shoppers, the busy rhythm of the mall continuing uninterrupted. No one paid much attention to the distant sound of engines until they grew steadily louder, distinct from the normal passenger vehicles. 4 olive-green Jeeps pulled into the lot in perfect formation, driving slowly and deliberately past the regular parking spaces. They stopped in a synchronized line directly in front of the mall entrance, blocking the main traffic lane. The bikers looked up, curiosity turning to unease, as 8 United States Marines in full-dress, blue uniforms stepped out of the vehicles. Each Marine moved with crisp precision, forming a line facing the seating area. Their faces were expressionless, backs, straight white gloves immaculate against the dark blue of their uniforms. These weren't weekend warriors or parade ground soldiers. Their ribbons and medals spoke of genuine combat experience. The sunlight gleamed off brass insignias that had been earned, not purchased online. Mall patrons stopped in their tracks. Phones emerged to record the unexpected scene. Children pointed and whispered questions to their parents. The tallest Marine, a master sergeant with rows of service ribbons adorning his chest, stepped forward. His weathered face suggested years of command, and his voice carried across the now silent parking lot. Sergeant Natalie Rhodes, United States Marine Corps, recipient of the Bronze Star with Combat Distinguishing Device. Purple Heart recipient. 11 years of honorable service, wounded in active duty while saving 3 fellow Marines. He paused, scanning the crowd, until his eyes locked on the bikers. You disgraced her today? The bikers shifted uncomfortably, looking at each other with uncertain expressions. The confidence that had fueled their mockery evaporated under the collective gaze of 8 combat veterans. Sergeant Rhodes lost her leg, pulling Lance Corporal Michael Davis from a burning Humvee after an IED explosion outside Fallujah. In 2007, she returned to the vehicle twice more, despite her injury extracting 2 additional Marines before the vehicle exploded. The Master Sergeant's voice remained level but carried unmistakable authority. She never speaks of her actions that day, but we do. A younger Marine with captain's bars stood at perfect attention. Sergeant Rhodes was the senior NCO on a convoy hit by complex ambush after the IED disabled her vehicle. She coordinated defensive positions while injured, maintained radio contact with QRF, and ensured all wounded were stabilized before accepting medical attention herself. From one of the Jeeps emerged a figure the bikers recognized immediately. The young man in the gray hoodie from earlier. He removed his hood, revealing a military haircut and a stern expression. He approached and stood beside the Master Sergeant. I served under Sergeant Rhodes in Iraq. He said, his voice carrying across the silent parking area. When I saw how you treated her today, I made a call. These Marines drove 2 hours to be here. The security guard who had questioned Natalie earlier emerged from the mall entrance, stopping abruptly at the sight of the Marines in formation. One of the Marines, a captain by his insignia, approached him directly. Sir, we understand you question the credentials of Sergeant Natalie Rhodes today. The guard swallowed visibly. There was a complaint. Sergeant Rhodes received the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with V device for valor. She has 3 Purple Hearts. She completed water survival school as the only female in her class. The captain's voice was measured but intense. She earned every accommodation this country offers its wounded warriors. By now, a substantial crowd had gathered. Store employees stood in doorways. Shoppers formed a loose circle around the confrontation. An elderly man in a Korean War veteran cap stood at attention. His own silent salute to the proceedings. The bikers sat frozen. Their earlier bravado evaporated under the unflinching gaze of 8 decorated Marines from one of the Jeeps. A ninth figure emerged, Natalie Rhodes herself having been contacted by her former subordinate. She walked slowly toward the assembled Marines, her cane tapping lightly on the asphalt every step, a testament to her daily battle against pain and limitation. She wore no uniform now, just jeans and a simple blue button-up shirt. But there was no mistaking the military bearing in her posture, the quiet dignity that transcended civilian clothes. At 48, her face showed the lines of both laughter and suffering, but her eyes remained sharp and alert as she approached. All 8 Marines turned in unison and offered her a formal salute. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the ambient sounds of the parking lot seemed to fade away. In respect for the moment unfolding before them, Natalie returned the salute. With perfect military precision, the Master Sergeant spoke again. This time directly to the bikers, stand up after a moment's hesitation. The 5 men rose to their feet, apologized to Sergeant Rhodes. The tall biker with the bandana stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the ground. "Ma'am, I apologize for my disrespectful behavior. I was wrong one by one." The others mumbled similar apologies. Natalie regarded them silently, her expression unreadable. Then she did something unexpected. She took her Bronze Star medal from her pocket and held it out for all to see. "This isn't mine," she said, her voice clear in the hush parking lot. "It belongs to Lance Corporal Davis. He didn't make it home. None of us who return are whole. Some wounds you can see." She gestured to her prosthetic leg, "and some you can't." She looked directly at the bikers. "I don't need your apology, but the next time you see someone with a disabled veteran plate or placard, remember this moment. Remember that not all sacrifices are visible and not all heroes look the way you expect them to." The transformation in the parking lot was immediate and profound. The bikers stood with heads bowed, all pretense of toughness gone. The security guard stepped forward, removing his cap. "Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for questioning your service," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "There's no excuse for how I treated you." Natalie looked at him with gentle eyes. At 48, she had learned that anger solves nothing, that understanding was more valuable than vindication. "You were doing your job based on information you were given," she said. "I understand." The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, but not before many approached Natalie personally. A Vietnam-era veteran in a wheelchair rolled up to her side and quietly thanked her for her service. His own sacrifices made decades earlier created an unspoken bond between them, a shared understanding that transcended the years and conflicts that separated their service. A young mother brought her wide-eyed daughter forward to shake Natalie's hand. "My daughter wants to join the Marines. Someday," she explained. "I think she just met her hero." Natalie bent down. "Despite the difficulty, if you decide to serve," she told the girl, "do it, because you believe in something bigger than yourself. That's what gets you through the hard days." The Marines prepared to depart, their mission accomplished. The Master Sergeant approached Natalie one last time. "You never needed to salute me," Natalie told him and the other Marines as they prepared to leave. "Just don't let people laugh next time. Not at me, not at anyone who served." The Master Sergeant nodded solemnly. "We take care of our own. Sergeant Rhodes always have, always will." As the group began to disperse, the biker with the bandana approached Natalie again, this time without his friends. "I was never military," he admitted quietly. "My dad was Vietnam. He came back different. I guess I've been angry about that my whole life." Natalie nodded. "Many of us come back different. I deleted the post," he said, showing her his phone, "and I posted an apology instead for what it's worth." She didn't respond immediately, but finally offered a slight nod. "It's worth something." As Natalie prepared to leave, the security guard approached her again, this time with the mall's general manager. "We'd like to do something," the manager said. "If you'll allow it." The next morning, when Natalie arrived for her physical therapy appointment at the VA hospital, her therapist greeted her with a surprised expression. "You're all over social media. He said, showing her his phone. The video had already received thousands of shares. Marines in dress blues standing at attention in a shopping mall parking lot honoring a female veteran who had been mocked for using a disabled parking space. Comments flooded in. This is what respect looks like. I'm in tears, watching these Marines stand up for one of their own. My sister served 2 tours in Afghanistan and gets the same treatment. Thank you for showing what real honor looks like. When Natalie returned to the mall 3 days later for her weekly grocery run, she found something unexpected. A new sign had been installed at her usual parking space, reserved for Sergeant Natalie Rhodes. USMC rededicated with gratitude for your service. As she stepped out of her van, a small boy approached her, holding a hand-drawn picture of a Marine in uniform. My dad was a soldier, he said, offering her the drawing. He says you're the bravest person he's ever heard of. Natalie knelt down, despite the difficulty with her prosthetic leg, and accepted the artwork. Thank you, she said. But there are many brave people who serve. Some never get recognized at all. The boy's father approached, extending his hand. I've been trying to explain to my son what courage means. Now I can just tell him about you. In the weeks that followed, Natalie received dozens of letters from veterans across the country who had seen the video. Many shared similar stories of being questioned or ridiculed because they didn't fit someone's image of what a veteran should look like. The local elementary school invited her to speak during their Veterans Day assembly, something she had always declined in the past. This time, she accepted standing before 200 children and their parents. Natalie shared not the dramatic story of how she lost her leg, but the smaller daily battles, learning to walk again, fighting through pain and finding purpose. When her military career ended abruptly, the hardest thing about being a veteran isn't what happened during service, she explained. It's returning to a world that often doesn't see or understand your sacrifice. The mall incident had an unexpected ripple effect throughout the community. The local VA office began an awareness campaign about invisible wounds of war. The shopping center implemented special training for security staff about approaching veterans with respect and dignity. The biker with the bandana, whose name was Rick, reached out to Natalie through the VA. He had started volunteering with a veterans group, driven by a new understanding of his father's struggles and a desire to make amends for his behavior 6 months after the parking lot confrontation. Natalie folded her Bronze Star medal and returned it to its case. For years, she had carried it as a private reminder of her worth when the world made her feel invisible now. For the first time since returning home, she felt seen not as a victim or a hero, just as a veteran who had served her country with honor. True courage doesn't come from loud voices, but from those who keep showing up long after the war ends in a world that often overlooks quiet sacrifice. Sometimes it takes others to stand up and remind us what honor really means. Natalie's story isn't just about a moment of public vindication, it's about the thousands of veterans who face silent battles every day. The Marines who came to her defense that day didn't just correct a single injustice, they reminded an entire community about the ongoing debt we owe to those who serve, and in doing so they sparked something greater, a renewed commitment to seeing the sacrifices that walk among us often unrecognized. For Natalie, the moment of respect wasn't about vindication, it was about visibility, about finally being seen, not for what she had lost, but for what she had given, and perhaps that's the most any veteran truly wants, not special treatment, but simple acknowledgement of the price they paid for something larger than themselves, ever seen. Someone disrespected just because they didn't look like a hero. Share it. Subscribe to Ironheart Stories, where silence meets honor.